welcome to our videocast, Let's Talk DevOps. I'm your host, Dave Fredericks. Our goal here is to highlight some of the interesting tech scene and transformation happening in our great city of Boston. Hello. We focus on everything DevOps, from people, process, technology, and tools. Really excited to be broadcasting here from the Bostonia Public House. Thank you to Megan Long. She's one of the directors of events. So if you're ever looking to host something and want to be in this great establishment, just reach out to her, Megan Long, and if you look at the hashtag below, all our contact information is there. Today, my guest is Amin from Acquia.
Sure. So I did a talk called People Metrics at TripleCon Ireland. People Metrics is basically, well, you take metrics on servers, you look at utilization, saturation, errors. Why don't you do the same thing for people? So my talk was about measuring things like happiness metrics, utilization and time spent in terms of the 4 types of work from the Phoenix Project to help generate positive change in your organization.
Oh, excellent.
Effort.
Excellent.
Manual effort. And I'm also building a site reliability engineering team. Actually, our first site reliability engineer will be doing the transition next Monday. So we're building out that team now.
All right, awesome, man. So how did you come up with your solution at Acquia?
That's a good question. It was kind of an iterative process, really. So the first thing was I actually went to DevOps Days 2014 here in Boston, and there were some very interesting talks, and it kind of turned me on to, hey, there's something not quite right with what I'm seeing on my team, because I was in operations at the time, and I want to figure out what it is. So one of the folks actually recommended I read the Phoenix Project, which, as many folks that would watch this know, it's kind of like the gateway drug to DevOps. You read it and then you ask a whole bunch of questions and you figure out what's going on.
Of course.
So I read the Phoenix Project, and it talked about the 4 types of work, and it talked about the impacts of unplanned work, and it talked about all kinds of things. So I got the crazy idea, hey, what if we actually quantified those on our team? That in combination with us implementing a Kanban process, limiting work in progress, visualizing it to the team, started to create an awareness that, hey, the team that a lot of other departments depend on to get things out to the customer is constrained. And we need to be able to figure out what that team is doing so that we can maximize throughput and maximize customer success.
Wonderful.
So that was the first real step. From there, everything branched out.
Who did you need to get involved or to get bought in to your plan, and how were you able to do that?
Sure. So there's a book that I read that I wish I read earlier in my process. It's called Leading Change. It's by a guy named John Cotter. So the first step, he has a series of 8 steps in producing change in your organization. The first step is to create a sense of urgency. So in order for you to create an actual lasting change in your organization, you're going to need the buy-in from management, ideally senior management, most ideally the CEO. So what I had to do was first build a coalition around myself of folks that are senior to me and are interested and are stakeholders in the current issue, so that we can start getting senior leadership in on it. So originally it was my boss, and I would generate these metrics and show it to him and say, hey, this is something we should pay attention to, and he agreed. And then we started branching out from there, and eventually we had the chief of product that saw this information and was very supportive, and was a decision maker to make a lot of the changes happen.
Oh, that's excellent. So what were some of the biggest challenges in implementing this plan?
Sure. So change is kind of difficult because you're having people having to think in a different way. One of the big things you have to think about is incentives. So every team, when you're starting in a world where that's composed of silos, every team has their own KPIs, their own goals, and their own incentives. So when you're going and talking about DevOps, there are teams that don't really get it, especially if they're not in the technical space, and therefore they're not reading the stuff that we're reading and looking at the stuff we're looking at. So the challenge is really being able to show them what's in it for them. How does this new thinking and this new process enable them to do their work? Of course, one of the big changes that's kind of that requires some work to get through the resistance as well. I have this mantra of own your service, which is if you're an engineer and you're on an engineering team and you're building a service, you should be operationally responsible for it. That's something that comes as a big surprise to some people, especially with the classic model of I write the software, I give it to ops, and then ops owns it. Well, the problem is you have a loose feedback loop, and you're not making it very easy to fix the problems as they come up. So those are the challenges I'm dealing with at the moment. And I'm sure any team would deal with the same challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great to hear. So one of the last few questions, what did you learn from this whole experience?
I learned a lot. I mean, I came from an ops background, and I mostly, spent my life thinking about computers and solving problems with them. And one of the big things I realized is that when you think about DevOps, DevOps isn't just the technical piece. It is also the social and the psychological piece to it as well, because teams are not made of computers, they're made up of people. So being aware of that and figuring out how people think and how they work and what their motivations are was very illuminating to me. So I ended up reading a lot of stuff that is totally not related to my career to help address this problem. So yeah, computers are really consistent people or not.
Yeah, that's a great point. Managing one is definitely different than managing the other.
Indeed.
So last question in closing, what suggestions would you have for any of our viewers who want to try to take on and implement something similar? Is there any kind of advice that you would have for them starting out?
Sure. I mean, well, the easy thing to do is just read the Phoenix Project if you haven't done so already, because it gives you a lot of introduction to basic concepts. The second thing you can do is, well, in order for the business to respond to a particular problem, you have to articulate it in terms of time and money. So by generating metrics around your team, such as quantifying, how much unplanned work your team is taking in, you could turn that into a dollar amount and then show stakeholders or senior leadership what the actual cost of the unplanned work is. With that information, it's going to be easy for you to convey that there is a problem that needs to be solved, and they'll be more motivated to fix it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's some great advice. That's all we have here. Amin, thank you very much for being on our first episode. We're really excited. If you guys want to reach out, check out the link below. That'll get you connected right into Amin if you had additional questions. Look forward to seeing you guys very soon. Thank you.
If you catch me at the border, I got visas in my name. If you come around